Welcome to Marketing, Media, and Money, your go-to podcast for proven profitable strategies, secrets, and resources from industry experts and global influencers to help you scale your business, shorten your learning curve, and stand out in a crowded, noisy marketplace. Here's your host, award-winning marketing and media strategist and international speaker, Patty Farmer.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. And I have a question for you. Are you an event or podcast host and searching for a way to identify untapped and creative sponsorship opportunities? Well, you're in the right place. Now, today, we're going to be talking about strategic event sponsorship for event and podcast hosts. And we have someone who has, a few years behind her in talking about this topic. So today, we're going to be talking with Alex Durant, who is a seasoned professional with over 15 years experience in managing sponsors at award-winning festivals across the U.S. Renowned for her concierge service and meticulous attention to detail, Alex has garnered praise from both festival clients and sponsors alike. Building and nurturing long-term relationships lie at the heart of her success. Alex founded Durant Consulting, Inc., which has overseen sponsorship fulfillment and advancement for over 500 brands, facilitating sponsorship fees that exceed $21 million. That's what I said, $1 million. Durant Consulting, Inc. not only manages sponsors, but also works with clients to craft event sponsorship proposals and to streamline all sponsor communication. So, Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. So let's just dive right in. So, Alex, I've heard that you share, whether you're hosting an event or participating in an event as a sponsor, that it's imperative to look at the event from a sponsorship lens to make the most out of the partnership. So could you share an example? Let's just jump right in. Can you share an example of a strategic approach that led to outstanding results for both the event host and a sponsor? Because I'm sure you have lots of stories.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of wine and food festivals over the years and even some large music festivals. So it's just so important to, if you're hosting an event, look at your event from that sponsorship lens to identify almost like, what do you have to sell to a sponsor that's going to make it great? You can't just say hey, we want you to be a sponsor. We're going to put your logo in our program. That really is kind of, we're past that. That might have worked 15, 20 years ago, but now sponsors want to have engagement with your attendees, whether that's through, interaction directly, if they're in a booth or have an activation space, or maybe they want to take the stage and have a chance to talk if you're, be a session host or a keynote speaker, or even just welcome the crowd. I was at an event recently where they had decided they wanted to be sustainable and not have water bottles anymore. It was a 2-day conference, wanted to get rid of all the plastic water bottles. So they got a water, I don't want to say the brand name, but, a sustainable cup that is branded with the event name and their logo. And then obviously the sponsor's logo was on it. That was the welcome gift for every attendee when they checked in. And then we just had water coolers set up for them to refill it. Well, then at the end of the weekend, they gave that sponsor an opportunity to come on stage and just say, it's been so great being a part of this 2-day, conference with all of you. We're so happy not only to support the mission of what this conference is about, but also the mission that you decided to be sustainable. So we hope you've enjoyed carrying around our, reusable cups all week and continue on. And I tell you, I still have mine. I use it all the time. What a great way to not only sponsor an event, but get your product in the hands of the attendees.
So I think that's really great when you can tie a mission, right? That's yours, and that it aligns with something the sponsor that you're asking to do. Because now, not only are they sponsoring maybe with money, and there's a lot of different ways. I know I've had lots and lots of sponsors, but I know that there's a lot of ways that are not just writing you a check. But when you can align those,
exactly,
I think that's where really, honestly, the magic happens, right?
Right. Which comes to, a lot of, I know this might be coming up in this conversation, but how, as a public speaker, can you get sponsorships? And I don't think you and I discussed this a while ago, but what if it's aligning with a company that believes in what you talk about, or they also sell a product that has to do with what you are talking about? Maybe they want to give the swag to everyone sitting in the room that day, or they want to do a giveaway, or they want to do, like they could support you as the speaker and almost sponsor you, but then tie into giving something to the attendees to make it on a larger scale.
And I think that's really powerful. Now, as an international speaker, I have this amazing sponsor who literally it was their idea. Crazy. And what they did is they made jewelry that actually was in Christie's in New York City. So we're talking high-end jewelry. And they had a piece of jewelry that just happened to be in my brand color. Just coincidentally, the stones were in my brand color. And they actually came to me and said, Patty, we know you do a lot of international speaking, and we would love to give you the necklace and the matching earrings. And what we would love it if you would just wear them, you would just wear them when you're international speaking. And I know they take a lot of photos of you. And whenever you're wearing it and there is a photo, if you will just, kind of tag us, that was our necklace, whatever. And I was like, sure. The necklace was like over $2,000.
Wow. I mean, I think that's rare, but very lucky that you had that as a sponsorship tie-in.
No, I still have that necklace and I love it so much.
There you go.
So, but I mean, that is an extreme example, right? But I have to tell you, one of the things I love to say is that's more about thinking outside the box, right? And not just getting caught up in, they could write me a check for this and they could write me a check for that, right? So I think that's important. So I know that you also like to talk about brand rub, which I just,
yes,
that is just a quotation there, right? Air quotes, brand rub, right? So can you explain the concept of brand rub and how, most of all, it can be leveraged, right? Because that's all about that, right? How can you leverage that to enhance the value and the visibility of the host sponsor partnership?
Well, like I said, I work and manage sponsors at major national wine and food festivals. So it's no surprise that when I'm working with the South Beach Wine and Food Festival, that a lot of their sponsors are like wine and spirit beverage companies, of course, but also lifestyle brands that also fit into the mission and the party vibe that we're throwing at this 4-day festival. So you've got anywhere from a cruise partner to a credit card company that's partnered to a, host hotel, to a vehicle sponsorship. They all want to attach to our demographic, and we want to attach to their demographic. So we're rubbing off on one another. That's why I call it the brand rub. So it wouldn't make sense for us to have a pharmaceutical company as a sponsor at the Wine and Food Festival. That was who, when I worked in the medical conferences, all of the sponsors were pharmaceutical companies. So like that brand rub. But even on a more micro level, at one of these wine and food festival events, they were throwing a dinner with a celebrity chef who had created like a 3-course dinner. The guests came in, and I was responsible for the wine sponsor. They had paired all the wines. They had figured out a wine pairing, a wine for the reception. All the guests came in. They had their welcome drink. They were escorted into the dining room. The tables were set beautifully, the menus on the tables to talk about all the pairings. And at each place setting was a bag of potato chips. And that was because that sponsor was willing to pay top dollar to have their bag of potato chips at every place setting. But in my mind, that completely diminished the feel and the exquisite dinner, vibe that we were hosting. But I also knew that bag of potato chips came with top dollar sponsorship money underneath it. But had that been a box of Godiva chocolates or something similar, that would have made much more sense. That brand rub didn't quite work out. So is it worth, even though maybe a sponsor is contacting you, willing to give you an item or money for you, had that piece of jewelry that been something that was not in your taste, would you have worn it at every single speaking gig? No. Absolutely not. You have to know what is your mission, what are your beliefs, who do you want to pair up with, Who do you want to rub up against? Like, you have to look, it's not just about the money when it comes to something that doesn't align with what you're working for.
Now, when you told me that story right there, I was thinking, oh, the guy that chocolates makes much more sense. That was what my brain was thinking. And I was waiting for you to say that the reason why it worked was because eating those potato chips would make you more thirsty and you drink more wine. But I was thinking, is she going to tie that together? But it makes so much sense in your example of how that may or may not be a good, brain work, right? So that really makes a lot of sense. Now, could we kind of go, I love that you said micro, because now we can swing back and forth. So again, whether you do events, you're a sponsor, or your podcast, whatever, from a podcast point of view, for them, how would that work for them? Like, how would brand rub and some of those things work for somebody who is a podcast host if they wanted to attract and incorporate sponsors into their podcast? And, so many podcast hosts, there's so many different podcast formats, right? So is this something that would work for them? And how would they attract and incorporate sponsors into those different podcast formats? And does it matter what that format is in order to get sponsored?
Well, part of looking at your event through that sponsorship lens is also identifying, it's not just about, what space you have at your event to have a table set up for a sponsor, or in the case of a podcast, do you have a slot for commercials? Like, that's the most easy thing to think about as far as a podcast. But also with that sponsorship lens, I talk about identifying all the marketing assets that you have available. So if you're hosting a podcast, are you sending an email about it? So in that email, is there a chance to do a little small ad for a sponsor, or at least logo inclusion, or a blurb about, we're excited to, this upcoming podcast is hosted or presented by XYZ company. Are you sending out social media? Could you give them a dedicated post on one of the channels? Are you on LinkedIn? Are you doing any print or digital advertising about your podcast? So thinking of all the places that you can incorporate them in your marketing plan, and those assets that are tied to marketing is another sponsorship sell for your potential sponsors, and a benefit, a deliverable that you would give back to them as part of their sponsorship.
So basically what you're saying is sometimes it isn't even about just the podcast. So I know that, for example, for me, I had a sponsor, and my sponsor is a podcast production company. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't just that. I think what made them want to be a sponsor was that I also published a magazine of the same name. And so they wanted to be a sponsor of the magazine because they knew that we had over 235,000 email subscribers, and they wanted to be in front of them. Because so it was a really easy fit, and it has worked really, really well. So I do think that it is kind of, again, thinking differently, and it's not just about the thing, right?
Exactly. It's leveraging all those other pieces that tie into the thing that you can give as an additional benefit.
Which kind of goes into the next thing I wanted to ask, which is really another thing that you talk about, what you call sponsorship real estate, right? So in this case, having my magazine and those other things really was real estate for me. But what are some of the, let's say, creative tips, right, for identifying those untapped sponsorship opportunities within events to attract potential sponsors? Because I think sponsorship real estate, I have to tell you, I love these phrases of yours, brand, strategic, event sponsorship real estate. I mean, I like it, Alex.
Thank you. Well, I've been doing this for a little while, about 15 plus years. Sponsorship real estate, we've touched on some of it. It's not just about it. First of all, it's, if you're having an event, it's your space. What do you have at your event that you can sell? But also I go to so many events, and I'm walking through, and I'm grabbing a cocktail from the bar, and I'm thinking, how come that's not sponsored product at this bar? Like, why is it just whatever bottles? They probably just got a package from the venue, instead of saying, hey, we could have a signature cocktail for this event presented by blankety blank vodka, or here's your first pour as you enter the door, and it's by this champagne company, and here's a tray full of glasses, and their table card is on the tray, and it's got their logo on it, so you know what you're drinking, it's sponsored. Or even if I see a dessert station, why isn't the dessert station sponsored by a local company? I mean, what a great opportunity for a local real estate company to underwrite that dessert table, throw their logo on the cupcakes, create a cookie that's in the shape of a home, and have a sign, dessert spread sponsored by XYZ real estate company. So much better than them being with a 6-foot table in the happy hour. Like everyone would have breezed right past them. No one would have talked to them. No one wants to get a pamphlet or a flyer. But if I go and get a cookie and I see that they've taken the time and they're supporting this cause, sponsored all the desserts, I'm going to walk away and think, that's the company I'd like to do business with. So it's identifying all the little pieces of your event. I mean, I'm sure you've even been to a gala where when you go to valet, there's like a little s'mores or hot cocoa station if it's in wintertime, so that while you're waiting for your car, and instead of getting annoyed that it's taking too long, they've gotten it sponsored, right? Like, brilliant. And if you're hosting a conference, that also is, your sponsorship real estate includes direct engagement with your attendees. I think I touched on this before. So do you have an opportunity for a sponsor to do a keynote or to host a session or be a sponsor of a breakout snack station? All of those little pieces, everything can have a sponsor attached to it.
I remember before Twitter was X, when it was Twitter, always at my events, we always have a tweet station. And so we always have a tweet station, and I always get that sponsored, and they provide the tweets that we at the tweet station. And they do it, and that's how they do it too. We have it all kind of set up like social media, whatever. But every one of the people who sponsor it, yes, they had their stuff on there too. But a lot of what they did was they were very big into Twitter, right? That was really where they had a huge presence. And so they really wanted people to connect with them there and kind of tie into it there and their product too. But it was really fun too. So I do agree with you, because I know that sometimes when I go to events, I'm not even in your space, but just that because I do events and I'm in marketing, when I see them, like, why are they not having that? You could be sponsored.
Right.
That could be sponsored. Right. Because there's so many things besides just a plastic swag bag and putting stuff like right, which most people throw away.
And to that X Twitter point, social media is, taken over, and the selfies rule. So even having a sponsor for your big photo activation, everyone's going to be taking a selfie in front of it, posting, tagging you and your event. Like, it makes it better direct engagement with all of the attendees. It makes it more fun for the audience.
No, I totally agree. But now, how can event hosts and podcast hosts leverage sponsorships that build their personal brand so it expands their reach within the target audience? Because, a lot of times we talk about business, but we have a personal brand too, right? So how can they leverage sponsorship to build their personal brand?
Well, in what way, right? Are you trying to just build your your subscribers? Are you trying to build your social? Are you trying to build your email database? I guess you have to look at what is the goal, and then with that goal, what are you asking the sponsor to do for you? So are you asking them, as a sponsor, we want you to cross-post, promote my brand, promote my event? Then it becomes a little more sounds like ad space more than sponsor space. So I guess I'd need to know a little more about what you're kind of...
If the goal is really to expand your reach, right? It's really to expand your reach. And sometimes that is kind of cross-promoting too, right? And I know a lot of times when you're trying to get into, you want to expand your target audience, or you want to get into a new market, right? You want to get into a new market and stuff. Though I have found that whenever you want to leverage those with your brand, trying to find some unique ways that you can do some sponsorship in there. Mostly because if you're trying to expand that, sometimes it's going to cost you some money to do it, right? It's going to cost you some money to do it. So that's always something that I am looking at. And I know that as a podcast host, it's a conversation I have with a lot of other podcast hosts when they're talking about it, right? They're like, well, how can we do it? Because my podcast is my brand, right? So,
right.
So my podcast is my brand, Marketing, Media, and Money, but it's not the name of my company though, right? So I do other things. So I think that really, honestly, it can sometimes be really a good question when you're thinking, how can you leverage? Because to me, that's what I want to do. How can I leverage everything, right? Because a lot of times what it is that you have a huge community, right? You have a lot of things that took you a lot of time, like you have a good audience. And then when you have an audience, finding ways that, that can work together. And I know sometimes that's probably more of a collaborative opportunity than a sponsorship one. But if you're going to be putting money into it, because you really want to tap into that, sometimes it can be something that that sponsorship would really work for. What advice would you give to like speakers and podcast hosts that want to, say, tailor their sponsorship packages, right, to attract brands that align with their values and audience? I know we talked about that a few minutes ago, really about making sure that you align your value, right, and that you stay in alignment and what's your vision and your mission. But if somebody had never done that, right, and they're an event host or a speaker or podcast host, and now they want to create sponsorship packages, what are the things that they should look to tailor them to that will attract those brands that align with their values?
Well, you need to create a sponsorship proposal that really, if you're hosting a podcast, gives a full picture of what your podcast is about. I want to pick up that package, look about what's the podcast about, what have been who are the past guests on the podcast, what are the general topics of the podcast. Then you go into your basically like your analytics. So how many, like you said, how many subscribers, how many downloads, how many people, generally tune in, that type of thing. All that data, even how many social media channels do you have that are promoting the podcast? How many followers do you have on each? When you, like you say, you've got an email database of 250,000 plus subscribers, that's all part of how you're promoting your podcast. That is very attractive to sponsors. They want to see that. Then you're getting into, okay, what do you have to offer? What are your sponsorship tiers or levels? If you're a bronze, silver, gold, bronze sponsored, you're going to get one social media post. We're going to put your logo on this place, blah, 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 blah. Like, break it down, give the cost. They need to know what they're buying, what you're offering. And it's all about then aligning with they're going to know if that's something they're in alignment with. And then when you approach, you can identify who you want to target, and you're going to send it to ones that align with you. So hopefully you're already picked out prospective sponsors that you're sending your package to that would be a good fit. If you happen to get you're going to promote that you're calling all sponsors or accepting sponsorship expecting sponsors right now for upcoming season. If you happen to get some that just came in cold, you want to make sure that they are in that brand alignment with you before you proceed.
That makes a lot of sense. So you just shared with us some of those key elements, right? There are key elements that should be in a sponsorship proposal, right? We need to include to stand out, right? And secure those high value sponsors.
Yep.
What are some of the ways that we really need to make sure that we include those things? And how should the documents be crafted to clearly define deliverables and mutual benefits? Because I have to tell you, every time I've ever heard of somebody who had a sponsorship that didn't go right, it always comes back to there was no clarity in really who was going to do what.
Well, I think the clarity begins with the sponsorship proposal. If it's outlined very neatly and clearly in the proposal, you know what you're selling, they know what they're getting. But then once they agree, that needs to go into a contract or even just a letter of agreement of this is what has been agreed upon. This is how much you're paying for the sponsorship. And these are your deliverables that I promised, harking back to the proposal. Now it's in a formal legal document that this is what you're going to do. But then you, as the event host or the podcast host, if you promised 18 social media posts, way too many, you're going to have to follow up on that and deliver that. So do you have a team doing those social for you? How are you writing all that content? Are you asking them to submit 18 social media pieces for you to post for them? Like, that's a lot of back and forth. I mean, even at a festival trying to get everyone to submit their logo, which has to be used on the website, on the signage, on the menus, on the welcome posters. Like that is one piece of data that we have to get from a sponsor. It takes a long time when you're talking about 150 to 200 sponsors. Then if you've promised social media, what channels are those going on? What's the content calendar look like? When do you need that content by to make sure you have time to get it posted and reviewed in time? If you've promised ad space, like you've got to collect that from the sponsor. If you've promised an email inclusion, a blurb, do you need to send them what you've written for their pre-approval before you put it into your e-newsletter? Like it's a lot of back and forth. So you have to be prepared with what you've promised as a deliverable that you can deliver it and that you have the means in the organization to traffic all that information.
Like you.
Right, exactly. That's why I get hired as a sponsor manager. My tracking grid, even if I'm managing 20 sponsors at a festival that's 4 days long and has over 100 events, some of those sponsors may be doing 3 events. Some of those sponsors may be doing 20 events. If it's the water sponsor, they might be at 50 dinners. So I need to make sure their logo is on every single dinner menu. My grid is like an insane matrix of information. But then I'm following up with the marketing team. Hey, when have you they're supposed to get one social media post. When is it on the content calendar? When do you need their information by? Then I'm going back to the sponsor. Hi, here's the specs for what we need from you. Here's when it's due. Then I send that back to the marketing team. Like there's a lot of back and forth.
Well, I think also
if you're doing it.
You touched on something I think is really important that most people may not think about, which is content, right? We all know content is king, but who's providing the content? Now, when you just mentioned that, I think that's really, really important because you're right. If that's never been discussed and you said, oh, I said I would do this 10 times and you do, but they don't like what you wrote, right? That is something that, they're going to say, oh, no, we didn't think that you represented us the way we want. We want you to take that down. Or they didn't like it. So they may choose to not be a sponsor for you the next time because they didn't like the way you did that. So knowing whether they are providing the content or you're providing the content, like I said, it has to be pre-approved. That takes a lot more time. And you're right. You have a team, or are you hiring somebody to do that for you? Because I don't think people would think about that content. I know that
exactly.
Just doing the things that I do, all the time. Sometimes yes, they want to see them, and sometimes no. And sometimes I have to provide content for them because they said that they would do it. And sometimes I provide it because I don't always love the way that they do it. You know what I mean? So,
right.
So that's a brand love right there. Like, is that congruent really in that? But that's a huge, huge thing because I think that it sounds so easy for people to say, on a more micro level, or if you're doing events, maybe not your 20 big, huge festival things, but you are a speaker and you do your own events. Maybe you do 2 of them a year and you have, 200 people attend them. Still, if you want sponsors for those, you need to be thinking about some of those things. And do you have time for those?
To execute it. Exactly.
I think that's
I worked with a music festival that they were very particular about social media, and they expected the sponsors to submit their own content, but then they would rewrite it in our festival voice because that was hitting a certain demographic. They didn't want it to sound too salesy or look like an ad. It needed to be like a sponsor, incorporation, partnership,
Mm-hmm.
So we had this extensive shared document where the sponsor had to submit the content. I had to tell the marketing team it was ready for a review. They would go in, they would rewrite it. They would tell me, now it's ready for you to send back to the sponsor to make sure they approve what we've rewritten. Sometimes it would go back and forth 2-3 times. This is to get one post for Facebook. It's not crazy.
Well, I think a lot of times.
But when you're looking at the integrity of your event, and this is, again, your name on the line, your reputation, your personal brand or your corporate brand, you want everything you put out there to be locked up.
And that makes sense.
And look.
And then, of course, from the sponsor's point of view, they want it to not have you change their stuff so much that it doesn't align with their brand anymore, right? So that's why it's important that you make sure right up front that the sponsors that you're choosing, that it already does align, and that you have that conversation right up front. So I can see where that would be really important. So we talked a little bit about metrics, but what metrics and indicators do you find that are the most impactful? Because sometimes people get caught up in vanity metrics, right? So what ones do you find that are most impactful for, say, evaluating sponsorship success, and how can they be tailored to different types of events and collaborations?
Well, I think it really depends on the type of event. So a conference is going to want to see how many attendees it ended up coming. How many speakers did you have? How many of those attendees went to the exhibit hall and interacted with the sponsors? A lot of times sponsors have a little passport that you have them sign. So the sponsors are able to see how many people came to their booth and really get that one-on-one engagement. At a festival, it could be, how many people attended, how many media impressions were there overall for all the sponsors, how many, if it's a product sponsor, like a beverage, how many cans were served, how many cocktails were served, liquid to lips, like they're trying to sell their product. That's what's important to them. For another sponsor, it could be how many signups did they get at their booth, how many people participate in their sweepstakes. It's going to be different pretty much every type of event. But the more, I think, recap points that you can give a sponsor, the better. Obviously, if they've had social media or any type of marketing deliverables, you want to either give a little recap deck and, show that post, show that when it was posted, show that it was included in the email. How many people clicked that email? What was the open rate on the social media? How many followers? How many clicked it? All of that. How many people asked the question or clicked through to their URL? Like all of anything you can give, I think the more the better, because they're going to use that to see their ROI, and also you can use it as a tool for re-engaging them for the future.
Because you'd like to talk about, to me, it's like a given, but hey, not everything does everybody think is a given, right? So you're talking about event recaps, and I love that. So you also talk about sending thank you notes. So thank you notes and event recaps, I've heard you say that they're essential in sponsorship management, right? But the impact that they can have on maintaining positive sponsorship relationship, because it is a relationship, right? It's not a necessarily a one-off, right? So what kind of things so you just got done telling us about all those things that you can put in an event recap. I think that makes so much sense. When you're sending the thank you card, like how entailed does that need to be? Because this is really relationship building in the thank you card, right?
Exactly. And maybe it's just because I'm a girl from the South, from Augusta, Georgia, but I was raised all about, if you got a birthday gift, you send out a thank you card. And I try to do that with my own 13-year-old son as much as possible. But so many times I see events that they end, and all of a sudden it's like, great, we're done, moving on, let's start planning for next year. But I just think it's so important, obviously, to thank the sponsors. I send a one-on-one email to each of my sponsors. The dust has settled, the festival's over, it was amazing. I just want to thank you again for your partnership, your sponsorship. And by the way, this year, your activation was top notch. I love the fact that you did blah, blah, blah to interact with the guests. I mean, it could be just a simple line. It's just like the same thing you would do if you're sending out your thank yous for a wedding gift or a birthday gift. Like, it doesn't need to be a diatribe. It's not like a 8-page letter. It's just like a little paragraph. Thank you so much. And then that's my chance to say, and I'd love to schedule a recap call with you. I want to get your feedback. It's so important. Most sponsors, this is not the only event they sponsor every year, or the only podcast, or the only conference. They're doing multiple. They and they're going to these events, so they see what's happening, and they have great feedback. I've had recap calls where a sponsor says, this, and this was great, but hey, you might notice that I just noticed you really didn't have enough recycling bins, because that's just something they noticed. They said at a recent event I was at, they not only had recycling, but also composting. And you're like, oh, great to know that you noticed that. So that's something we need to think about as a festival or as an event moving forward. Like, It could be not related to their sponsorship at all, but because they are event experts, they have great feedback. And if something did go wrong in their sponsorship, maybe a social media post was skipped or their power went out in their booth, that's usually not something we could take care, control, but it's great to acknowledge it. I'm so sorry. I know your power went out. As you know, you texted me. I was on the radio with the production team. It was back on within 5 minutes or 3 minutes. But I'm so glad that we have this communication, that we were able to solve it quickly. It's like you have to acknowledge everything they say, and then you put it in a recap and then in notes. Then for the next year, when you're starting conversations about their sponsorship, potential sponsorship, it's great to bring that up. Hey, remember last year you mentioned you loved your location, but you thought if you moved two steps down, you would have liked that better. We remember that. We're going to move you down this year. And
I think people like to be heard, and that you listen to what they said. Kind of like in the thank you notes, if you can pick out something just very specific to them. Kind of like how like at Christmas, you get all these Christmas cards from these people, and then they're just like mass Christmas cards, and they're just like whatever. It's like, why didn't you even bother saying it? You're not going to say something personal or acknowledge something or whatever. Like, that's just a waste of paper. And so I really think that, personalizing that and them knowing that you remembered and that you listened could be. And, going back to what you said about the recycle thing, I love the liquid to rip. So that was really good. But I mean, like, if that was something that they were giving out and it was something that could be recycled, of course they're going to notice that, right? So I think that was, I think that is really important. So do you see, I always think it's important to know what not to do as well as it is to know what to do, right? So do you see some common mistakes or challenges that event organizers kind of really face when they're doing sponsorship management, or, especially ones that want to do it themselves, them hiring somebody that this is what they do, what strategies do you recommend that they overcome those hurdles? What are some of the most common things that you see?
I see just lack of communication. When I've worked on the brand side a little bit, and I go to a festival and I'm working with the wine sponsor, and I say, what time are we loading in? And she says, I don't know. I never got an information about when we're supposed to bring our car and drop off our boxes or set up. And I'm thinking, how could you not have gotten this? Like, that's basic information. Or where do we pick up our credentials? Oh, I don't know. It's unclear. And just think that is so easy. It's communication. It's looking through all the parts from start to finish of the contract, happening, being signed, and then working on through all those deliverables, ensuring that they're taken care of. And then if it's an on-site event, the sponsor needs to know what time are they showing up? What time is their speaking session slotted for? What time do you need them to be mic'd up? You've got to give the...
I love that, because I think, a lot of times when you're a host of an event, I do it. When you host an event, especially like the day or so before we were actually getting ready, your setup and all that stuff, your mind is on these things. I don't know how anybody could not have a team or hire somebody to take care of those things, because the reality is if you're stepping on that stage or you're whatever it is that you're doing, you need to be focused on the people who are attending and how you're going to do it. And all those other things have to be done right, and they have to be done right. And so you can do both, and do them both well, in my opinion, right?
Right. And if you're the event host, you want your time available to hobnob and schmooze with the sponsors. You don't want to be giving them here's your packet, here's this. You want it, welcome, so glad you're here, the blah, blah. It's just the same reason you would hire an event manager. They're dealing with the
cold in here,
the BEO and the food. Exactly. They're dealing with the hotel contact, or they're dealing with the rental companies. They know where the portos need to be dropped. Right now, you don't need to be doing that.
That's why most of the time when you go to events, they always start somewhere in the beginning, there's always those, like hospitality things. Here's where you go for your bio breaks, right out the door, right? If you have anything. And a lot of times it's because really you don't want somebody coming up while you're on stage trying to do whatever you're going to do. And now it's kind of cold in here. Could you turn up the heat, or whatever, right? So
Right.
The thing is, I don't even want to think of those things, right? You have to have somebody who's going to be like, yes. And so whether it is an on-site but I believe that that's great when you're at the event, but all the stuff that comes before that, that's where it really matters, right? And especially if you're going to have sponsors, those things, you cannot drop the ball there. That has to be done right. And that's where you don't really want to be worrying about those things yourself. So I could really see where hiring someone like you would be there.
Exactly. You want your sponsors that have paid money to be there and to support your event to have like that white glove concierge service. You want them to feel like they're taken care of, they're getting the best customer service. And of course, that sponsor manager or that person that you've hired, they're going to report back to you. And also, I always say, like, if there is an issue, tell the event host first what's going on. Like, I might figure it out, like, oh, they lost power for 5 minutes, we got it back on. Well, I'm going to tell my leader or, whoever I'm reporting to at the end of the day, hey, just so you know, this happened. Because the worst thing is if then that sponsor walks up to them and says, did you know that we lost? Oh, yeah, I heard you did lose power. And I think Alex said you got it back within 5 minutes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, it was. Then all of a sudden they changed their tune. It was no big deal. Sponsors do tend to blow up little things, but if you take care of it and then the main person in charge knows everything that's happened, it's then they see, oh, wait, there's a lot of communication going on. Everyone's in the loop. We are being taken care of.
I think that's great. A lot of sense. What would you say are some emerging trends in event sponsorship that event organizers and sponsors should be aware of? And how can they leverage those trends to gain a competitive edge and enhance their event experience?
Well, it's funny enough. I just learned about a new company and had a conversation with them about a week ago. They have a whole digital swag company. So they can turn a wristband with their chip in it to a band that you scan into your own phone. And you can, if the event is the one that gives out the band, you could then go to every sponsor station and tap it, and then their data would come to your phone and you would say, oh yeah, I visited Patty Farmer's booth. I visited Alex's booth. Here's a blurb about it. Or it could be sold to one sponsor specifically if they're have a big activation. So you tap, and then if you've taken a photo at their activation, that photo goes into your phone, into your data. The whole URL that it taps into could be branded by that sponsor and owned by that sponsor. Then the sponsor's getting the data of who taps and all the contacts. So what a great way. And they can do anything. It could be a chip on the lanyard. It could be a chip on a koozie. It could be a chip on a band. It could be a chip on a poster. So they're really revolutionizing kind of those analytics.
Technology. I think, remember when they came out with, I don't know how long ago, but remember when technology really sped up the check-in process? Right, when you check in and everything online, and now it's like so much easier and all that kind of stuff. And they do so many things now where people can interact, and I mean, there's just so many ways that you're interacting before you even get there. And that's great sponsorship opportunities too, right? And so I love that.
Exactly.
So, Alex, thank you so much for being here with me today. And you came bearing a gift, and I love it because your gift ties back to probably the biggest question everybody wants to know is about the sponsorship proposal, right? So will you tell everybody a little bit about your gift? And I just want you guys to know about our listening or watching. You're on our YouTube channel or you're just listening. Just look below and there is a button there for you to just grab it. But tell everybody what it is that they're going to get.
Just a little freebie, but it's a download of the 10 questions you should ask yourself before you draft your sponsorship proposal. So it's helping you kind of look through your event, what we talked about through that sponsorship lens, identifying some of those deliverables that you can give to your sponsors. Just a few questions that'll really trigger some good thought to put into that.
Love that. And I noticed that you said that one of the marketing media money strategies that you're using today is about hiring a virtual assistant. So tell us a little bit about that strategy and how that is working for you.
Yes. Well, it's funny. It all started really with, I took a class about being more present on Instagram for business and really getting your face on camera, because I've been doing these festivals for 15 years and a sponsor manager. It's like my close friends know what I do, but everyone else in the world probably doesn't really understand what it is that I do. So I took this class and I started thinking, yeah, I've got to post more and talk about all these things. And it's daunting.
Isn't it, though?
You film, you got to talk, you got to film it. You need to put auto captions on it. You've got to put the text on top to start the video. It was too much. I didn't want to do it, but I hired a virtual assistant 2 months ago. She's doing all of that for me. Plus she's doing data entry. Plus she's doing research. Plus she's great in Canva. She's amazing. I'm thinking, why did I wait so long to do this? It's taking a lot off of my plate that I can focus on the bigger picture.
Not only that, but it gives you an opportunity to focus more on the things you like to do, the things you're good at, and big ticket items too, right? Versus like tedious tasks.
Exactly.
I love that.
Exactly.
So I really think that what that really says, from somebody who, like you said, you've been in business for 15 years, you do all these things. It doesn't matter whether you're just done one event or two, whether you're a podcast host, never done it, whether you're looking for sponsorship opportunities, all of those things, there's always going to be things that maybe you don't love to do. And whether it is something as simple as hiring a VA or something like hiring you to take care of all of those things for them on the back end so they can step up and serve in what their area of expertise is. And they're brilliant, right? It makes a lot of sense. So I have to tell you, Alex, thank you so much for being here with me today. This has been fabulous. And I love that you shared your brilliance, so generously in answering the questions. And I'm sure everybody took a lot of notes. So I appreciate you being here with me today. And to my audience, thank you so much for spending time again with us and showing up every single week. And if you like this episode, and I'm sure you did, please like, share, review, all those things, right? All those things on your favorite listening channel. And also, if you haven't already read we talked about it earlier, about our Marketing Media Money magazine, please grab your free copy at m3digitalmag.com. Thank you so much. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining us today on the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. To shorten your learning curve even more, make sure to grab your free copy of the Marketing, Media, and Money magazine at m3magazine.com. That's M3magazine.com. I promise your business will thank you.